One afternoon, the courtroom felt different the moment people walked in. Not louder, just heavier. At the plaintiff's table stood a middle-aged man, his jaw tight, eyes fixed across the room, like he had already decided how this would go. Beside him sat a woman, his wife, arms folded, posture rigid. Across from them sat another couple, younger, tense. The woman avoided eye contact entirely. The man stared straight ahead, unmoving. The bailiff called the case. Richard Hale versus Daniel Carter, two families. Judge Judy entered, took her seat, and immediately picked up on the tension. "All right," she said, "let's begin." Her eyes moved to the plaintiff. "Mr. Hale." Richard stepped forward. "Your Honor, I'm here because my daughter's wedding was ruined, and he's responsible." The words landed sharp. Judge Judy turned her head slowly toward Daniel. "That's a serious claim." Daniel didn't respond. Richard continued, his voice controlled but carrying anger. "We hired him to handle catering for the event, paid in full, signed contract, everything." Judge Judy nodded. "And what happened?" Richard's expression tightened. "He didn't show up." A ripple moved through the room. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're saying there was no catering at your daughter's wedding?" Richard nodded. "None." His wife spoke, unable to hold it. 200 guests, and nothing." Judge Judy raised her hand. "One at a time," then to Daniel. "Is that true?" Daniel finally spoke. "Yes." Silence. Not denial, not explanation, just yes. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "Explain." Daniel took a breath. "I didn't show up." A pause. "Because I couldn't." Richard stepped forward immediately. "You didn't even call." Judge Judy raised her hand again, then back to Daniel. "What stopped you?" Daniel hesitated. That hesitation stretched, not evasive, just loaded. "My father was in the hospital," he said. The room shifted, subtle, but real. Richard didn't move. "That doesn't excuse." Judge Judy lifted her hand again, then looked at Daniel. "When did you know you couldn't fulfill the contract?" "Morning of the event." Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "And you didn't notify them?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. "No." The word landed heavier this time. Judge Judy leaned back. "So you knew, and you said nothing?" Daniel nodded once. "Yes." Richard's wife shook her head. "Do you know what that did to us?" Judge Judy didn't look at her yet. She kept her eyes on Daniel. "You left 200 people without service, on a wedding day." Daniel didn't argue, because he couldn't. Judge Judy continued. "Did you arrange a replacement?" "No." "Did you refund the money?" "No." Each answer built something, piece by piece. Judge Judy leaned forward. "So help me understand this." Her tone was calm, but sharper now. "You had a signed contract, full payment, and you chose not to show up, not to call, and not to fix it." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "I didn't choose that situation," he said. Judge Judy nodded once. "But you chose how you handled it." Silence. That line hit. Richard looked down briefly, then back up. Judge Judy turned to him. "What are you asking for?" "Full refund," Richard said, "and damages." Judge Judy nodded, then looked back at Daniel. "Do you dispute that?" Daniel hesitated. "No." Another shift. Judge Judy leaned back. "So the facts aren't in dispute." A pause. "Failure to perform, no notice, no mitigation." She picked up the contract briefly, then set it down. "This is straightforward." But something in her tone suggested it wasn't over, because the room still carried something beyond the contract. Judge Judy looked between both families, carefully. There was more here, more than money, more than a missed service. "Is there anything else I should know?" she asked. Richard didn't hesitate. "Yes." He turned toward Daniel. His voice changed, less controlled, more personal. "He didn't just ruin a wedding." A pause. "He ruined his own sister's wedding." The room froze, completely. Daniel didn't move, didn't react, because that truth was already sitting there. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "Your sister?" she repeated. Daniel nodded once. "Yes." Silence, heavy, unavoidable. Because now, this wasn't just a business dispute. This was something else entirely. And everyone in the room felt it. Judge Judy didn't speak for a moment. She looked at Daniel, not just as a defendant now, but as something else. "You were hired to cater your own sister's wedding." Daniel nodded once. "Yes." Judge Judy leaned back slightly. "And you didn't show up?" "Yes." No excuse added, no defense, just the fact. Richard let out a sharp breath. "We trusted him." Judge Judy raised her hand, then looked back at Daniel. "Why didn't you call?" The question was simple, direct, but heavier now. Daniel swallowed. "I couldn't." Judge Judy didn't react. "Couldn't or didn't?" A pause, longer this time. Daniel's voice dropped slightly. "I didn't." That answer changed everything, because now it wasn't about circumstances, it was about choice. Judge Judy leaned forward. "You knew the impact." "Yes." "You knew the expectations." "Yes." "And you still chose silence." Daniel didn't respond, because there was no version of that answer that softened it. Richard's wife shook her head, her voice breaking slightly. "She was waiting for you." Daniel closed his eyes for a second. Just a second. Judge Judy noticed. "She's your sister," she said. Daniel nodded. "Yes." Judge Judy held his gaze. "Did you speak to her after?" Daniel hesitated. Then, "No." The room shifted again, heavier, because that silence was bigger than the first one. Judge Judy leaned back slowly. "This isn't just a breach of contract," she said. Her voice stayed calm. But it carried something else with it. A pause. Something personal. Richard stepped forward slightly. "She trusted him more than anyone," he said. Judge Judy raised her hand, then turned to Daniel. "Let me ask you something." He looked up. "When you didn't show up, when you didn't call," a pause, "what did you think would happen?" Daniel didn't answer immediately, because now there was no way to frame it, no way to minimize it. "I didn't think," he said finally. Judge Judy nodded once. "That's clear." Silence. Then she leaned forward again. "Your father was in the hospital." "Yes." "That's serious." "Yes." Another pause. "But emergencies don't remove responsibility." A beat. "They change how you respond to it." Daniel didn't speak. Judge Judy continued. "You could have called." A pause. "You could have sent someone." Another pause. "You could have done anything other than nothing." Each line landed, measured, precise. Daniel's posture had changed now. No longer rigid, just lowered. Judge Judy picked up the contract again. "This part is easy," she said. "Failure to perform." A tap. Failure to notify, another. Failure to mitigate. She set it down. That's liability. But she didn't pick up her pen yet, because the room still held something unresolved. Judge Judy looked toward Richard, then his wife, then back to Daniel. "There's something else here," she said. A pause. "And I'm going to ask it directly." The room didn't move, because everyone knew this wasn't about the contract anymore. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "Did you avoid them because of what happened that morning?" A pause. "Or because you didn't want to face them?" Daniel's eyes flickered, just slightly, and that was enough, because that question didn't need a long answer. It just needed the truth, and everyone in the room was waiting for it. Daniel didn't answer right away. His eyes dropped to the table. His hands, which had been steady the entire time, shifted slightly. That was the first real break. "I didn't want to face them," he said. Quiet, but clear. The room went completely still, because that answer carried more weight than anything before it. Richard closed his eyes briefly. His wife looked away. Judge Judy didn't move. She just watched him. "You chose not to face them," she repeated. Daniel nodded once. "Yes." A pause. "And instead, you said nothing." "Yes." Judge Judy leaned back slowly. "That's where this stops being about circumstances," a beat, "and becomes about accountability." Silence. Daniel didn't argue, because now there was nothing left to defend. Judge Judy picked up her pen, then paused, looked at Richard. "What happened that day?" she asked. Richard took a breath. "We scrambled," he said. "Family stepped in. Friends helped." A pause. "But it wasn't what it was supposed to be." His voice tightened. "She kept asking where he was." That line landed, heavy. Daniel looked down again. Judge Judy turned to his wife. "Did she know why he didn't come?" She shook her head. "No." Another silence. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "So not only did you fail to show up," she looked at Daniel, "you left her without an explanation." Daniel's voice came out lower now. "Yes." Judge Judy nodded once. "That matters." A pause. "More than you think." She finally began writing. The sound of the pen filled the room again. Steady, final. Then she stopped, looked up. "Judgment for the plaintiff." Richard didn't move, didn't react, just listened. "Full refund of the contracted amount." A pause. "And additional damages for the failure to perform on a significant event." The words landed firmly, but the room stayed quiet, because the money wasn't the center anymore. Judge Judy wasn't finished. She leaned forward slightly. "And let me explain something to you." Daniel looked up. "When something goes wrong," a pause, "you don't disappear." Another pause. "You show up more." That line settled deeper than the rest. Daniel didn't speak. He couldn't. Judge Judy continued. "Because silence," a beat, "does more damage than the mistake itself." The room didn't move, didn't breathe, because everyone felt it. Judge Judy leaned back. "Case closed." The gavel came down, sharp, decisive. But no one moved right away, because what had just happened wasn't just a verdict. It was something else. Daniel stood slowly, not rushed, not defensive, just heavy. Across from him, Richard and his wife gathered their things, not celebrating, not satisfied, just done. As Daniel turned toward the exit, he stopped, just for a second, then said, "I'll talk to her." No one responded, because that wasn't for the court anymore. That was for something outside of it. And as he walked out, it wasn't the judgment that followed him. It was the silence he left behind, and the one he still had to break. Daniel stepped into the hallway, the courtroom door closing behind him with a quiet finality. For a moment, he just stood there, not moving, not thinking clearly, just feeling the weight of everything he hadn't said. Footsteps approached from behind, Richard and his wife. They didn't rush past him. They slowed, then stopped a few feet away. No one spoke at first, because now there was no judge, no structure, just people. Daniel turned. "I meant what I said," he began. "I'll talk to her." Richard looked at him, not angry, not even surprised, just tired. "You should have talked to her that day," he said. Simple, direct. Daniel nodded. "I know." A pause. "I didn't know how." Richard's wife stepped forward slightly. "You didn't try." That line landed clean. Daniel didn't defend himself, because it was true. "I thought if I gave it time, it would get easier," he admitted. Richard shook his head slowly. "It doesn't." A beat. "It gets worse." Daniel looked down. That part. He understood now. Richard continued. "She waited for you that entire day," he said. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Not to escape it, just to face it. "She didn't care about the food," Richard added. A pause. "She cared that you weren't there." That hit differently, because it stripped everything else away. Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand." Richard studied him for a moment, then said, "Do you?" A pause. "Or do you just understand what the judge said?" Daniel didn't answer immediately, because for the first time he had to separate the two. "I understand what I did," he said, quiet but real. Richard held his gaze for a second longer, then gave a small nod. "Then fix that. Not the money, not the case. That." Daniel nodded. "I will." Richard's wife stepped back. "That's between you and her now," she said. No anger, no emotion left to push, just distance. They turned and walked toward the exit. This time, they didn't stop. Daniel stood there watching them leave, then slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, held it, stared at the screen. His sister's name, right there. He didn't call, not yet, because this time, he wasn't going to say it quickly or avoid it halfway through. He needed to say it right, and that meant actually showing up. He put the phone back in his pocket, took a breath, and walked toward the exit. Not rushed, not hesitant, just ready. Because the courtroom had already ended the case. But what mattered now was the conversation he had avoided. And this time, he wasn't going to walk away from it.